Another edition of The Informer and another opportunity to speak to the Daily Mail's Wayne Flower about the latest news that's making headlines. What's been the story or the stories that have really made the biggest impact this week?
Well, this week, George, it's been a big news week, of course.
Huge week,
but
yeah.
In Melbourne at the moment, there's an ongoing, it's a tragic story of a young 15-year-old out in Deer Parkway, Solomon, from a big Tongan family, who has been...
Yeah,
he has been stabbed to death there, which... No one has been charged over that alleged murder at the moment, but 6 youths, very young kids, have been charged with being involved in the assault, and it's all coming down to now that of the gangs, the youth gangs of Melbourne, and it seems to have just blown completely out of control.
Now these are the very gangs that the police and others have told us don't exist.
Yeah, well, they do and they don't. I mean, the police have come out today and they've not backed away that gangs do exist. I mean, you and I, those of us in the community know that they exist. It's what the degree of what you call a gang. I mean, we know there's outlaw motorcycle gangs, and then there's a bunch of little kids who get on Facebook and they muck around, which is what these kids have done, but it's obviously escalated into something
Is
very,
it true
very
that
deadly.
this escalated from a social media posting?
That is the word from down there on the street. The kids who were down there yesterday were all suggesting that. I mean, that'll be part of the police investigation. I mean, you're dealing with a bunch of kids, and you would think when you'd have 6 kids who have been charged, that perhaps by now you'd have someone charged with the murder.
But the charges, that of a fray? Or
a fray, that's right.
That have been levelled?
These kids were involved in the actual, the riot where poor Solo was killed.
Yeah.
Whether one of those kids ends up being charged with murder as well, I guess we wait and see. Late yesterday, police were looking for a knife in that area. You assume they were looking for the knife at about 3 o'clock. Yesterday.
I'm surprised that the Today Show was very quick to interview a young cousin of young Solomon. I was astonished that they would put a young girl up in school uniform, no less, on national television. And she was explaining that she was aware of what transpired and who was to blame. It's an amazing, and I would have thought, extraordinary bit of extraordinary risk that was taken by a media organisation to follow up on the story. It's to have an eyewitness, a child eyewitness on national television. Look, that's the editorial call for Channel 9. I'm sure the police probably were fairly uncomfortable and perhaps would have had something to say about that after. And look, we've just got to hope that that these gangs that they pull their heads in now. There is a huge police presence in that area. The police have been given special powers at the moment to search and to question anyone really, kids out in the street. So we just got to hope that things will settle down there, because apparently there's going to be a big rumble planned. On social media, they're talking about this on Friday at some location there. So it could get very, very messy. The last thing we want is this to continue to simmer and to run riot. It's as ugly as you can imagine, and a young boy, a 15-year-old, has lost his life.
Absolutely.
Just terrible.
Yeah, they're just kids.
Talking about another story that we've followed for the best part of the last couple of weeks on The Informer, you touched on 2 campers who have been missing for quite some time. We're now hearing that it's quite possibly a third person involved in the disappearance.
That's right. Police came out this week about Russell Hill, and who was off camping. It can now be revealed with his long-term extramarital lover, Mrs. Clay. So the police have said that they now believe that possibly they've been caught up in some sort of random attack where they've been murdered, taken away,
or murdered at that site and removed. They've searched everywhere.
So we're hearing, let me just reiterate, let me just backtrack for a moment. Two people, long-time campers, experienced, well known to one another,
Yep.
went out for a weekend together.
Yep.
And it's turned ugly, and someone else has come along the lines of the Falconio disappearance years ago, where he and his then British partner were travelling around Australia, and they got set upon, and of course he's never been cited, and a man is in jail, of course, paying the penalty for the murder. What I'm reading between the lines is that they've been murdered.
Well, it's the stuff of horror movies, really. You see Wolf Creek and the likes. Police, it's really wide open at this stage. That they are open to anything. I mean, for all they know, an alien could have abducted them. But the best scenario that they're coming up with at the moment is that potentially they had some sort of run-in with someone out there in the wilderness,
and it's turned
and it's escalated. Maybe he clocked someone on. Someone got clocked on the head, and it's turned bad. They really just don't know. So they're calling on people who may have been in that area with dash cam footage or anything. It was right on COVID lockdown, so they're hoping that maybe some people were afraid to come forward from the time that they might do it now. They just need to tick off everyone who was in that area. It's a very remote place. It's not a popular sort of national forest. It's a little bit more scarce. So.
All right, so we've got the story that we mentioned, the young 15-year-old lost his life, and that story continues to simmer. We've got the two long lost campers. We're now hearing there's another element, and that is a dark element, that a third person is involved. What other stories have been making an impact, especially in Melbourne, and you've been covering on the Daily Mail?
Yeah, well, work in progress, looking into the amount of charities going on around Australia at the moment, and
suffering,
and how they operate largely, and the way money goes to them, the way that money is distributed, and the way that they are or are not held accountable.
Are we talking about legitimate charities, or ones that work on the fringes that we think are proper and right, but they're not?
Well, there's some very large charities, involved in perhaps not so legitimate practices, and they all have to provide their financial records each year to the Charity Commission. And if anyone wants to go through and have a look at some of that paperwork, it's clearly visible for the public. There are some big questions that need to be answered from a lot of these charities, and the people who need to ask those questions are the Charity Commission, and they really don't say much. They don't publish much. They will publish information if they do happen to catch a dodgy charity, but for all of those reports, and there would be dozens and dozens of reports made to that commission. What are they doing? Nobody really knows, and they won't answer any questions.
And you're working on it for the Daily Mail at the moment?
Absolutely.
All right. If you want to know any more about what Wayne gets up to, check out either The Informer or the Daily Mail.
Thanks, George.